The IAEA chief's visit to Seoul appears to have left some unconvinced about Japan's plan to release the Fukushima wastewater. Let's take a look back on Grossi's visit to Seoul with Mr. Walter Sim. He's the Japan correspondent at the Straits Times. Good morning.
Good morning.
First off, Walter, how meaningful was Grossi's visit to Seoul?
Well, I would say it was exceptionally meaningful. Grossi did promise, after all, in Tokyo when he released the IAEA report last week that the agency would be involved in every step of the way in explaining and monitoring Japan's discharge of treated water from the Fukushima nuclear plant. And thus, his visit to Seoul can be seen as a way to back up his words with concrete actions. And there is, of course, no better way to explain the science behind the discharge than to engage directly with the leaders of South Korea, as well as in his next stops, New Zealand and the Cook Islands, where he is off to next. Particularly, I think there is value in going to Seoul as well and being directly confronted by the protesters, because that would have given him a tangible sense of how controversial, how political and emotional the issue is. I actually do kind of hope that this experience would offer him some insights on how to properly calibrate what the agency tells the public, as there is, after all, often a disconnect between what the IAEA says. It's really focused on really dishing out the science and what the regular man on the street actually hears the agency saying.
Right. His trip to Seoul and himself coming to South Korea to explain the report was a much needed task that needed to be done. Now, then why did Grossi make an in-person visit to South Korea to explain the latest IAEA report, especially right after visiting Japan?
Well, I think there is certainly value in having engagements directly between the very top of the IAEA agency and with the leaders of South Korea, both in the ruling parties as well as the opposition party. And I think Grossi hoped to be able to answer as many questions as possible. Of course, an in-person appearance would make him look more sincere, definitely. And I do think that South Koreans from all walks of life, from both the government to ordinary folk, people who are both conservative and liberals, would have many questions that they want Grossi to answer. It is telling, of course, that he said it was absolutely logical that the plan has drawn plenty of attention. And I think South Korea, definitely being a neighboring country to Japan, is one of the most important stakeholders. And as such direct explanations and engagement is necessary.
Right. South Korea is, in fact, one of the closest, geographically closest countries to Japan. That's why Grossi really felt the need to visit South Korea to show that sincerity, right?
Exactly.
Right. And also, we are learning that the two leaders of South Korea and Japan are going to sit down for talks on the sidelines at the NATO Summit this week. And of course, the discharge plan will be among the items on the agenda. What can we expect from the talks?
Well, that's a difficult question, because I'm not personally privy to, the background preparations for the meeting. But I do think that definitely Prime Minister Yoon-Kishida would take this opportunity, and he would definitely take every opportunity to discuss and explain the current situation in Fukushima with world leaders, both President Yoon as well as the other leaders he's meeting at the NATO as well as in the EU and the Middle East, where he's off to this week. Taking a broader view of bilateral relations between Japan and South Korea, I think Japan knows it's definitely in its interest that a conservative administration in South Korea is in power, given that Yoon's administration has really paid attention to healthy Japan-South Korea relations. And we also do see a gap between how the ruling opposition parties in Seoul are reacting to the discharge plan. And as such, I can't help but wonder if the leaders would actually privately spend some time discussing how to manage this ongoing opposition, including what more Japan could be doing to allay these concerns. Apart from Fukushima, of course, they would definitely discuss geopolitics, including the upcoming plan to open a NATO liaison office in Tokyo, I think.
Right. I'm sure Kishida feels the need and also the responsibility to ask for Seoul's understanding as much as Grossi felt the need to do so.
Definitely.
Then, Walter, will Yoon-Kishida talks at the NATO summit have any impact on Japan's wastewater release plan? What do you think?
Well, I don't think the talks would actually change anything about the plan, given that everything is really pretty much cast in stone. Last Friday, Japan's Nuclear Regulation Authority issued a permit to TEPCO, which is the plant operator of the Fukushima Daiichi plant. And the Nuclear Regulation Authority approved the facilities that the operator TEPCO has built for the water release. And that is pretty much the final requirement. And all that remains now really is a decision on the date as to when to start.
Right. If Japan does go ahead with the release next month, that means we only have 2 to 3 weeks left at least. And also lawmakers from South Korea are also traveling to Japan to investigate more so that the discharge can go successfully, right?
Definitely. And it's quite interesting to see what the opposition lawmakers say in Tokyo this week because, well, the South Korean government did last week say it respects the IAEA report. It also issued its own independent investigation into the Fukushima treated wastewater. And South Korea, I believe, has already given its stamp of approval. I mean, South Korea being President Yoon's administration, of course.
All right, Walter, thank you so much for joining us this morning. You have a good day.
Same to you. Thank you.